Poor elderly woman cared for twins. 14 years later, they returned by helicopter, and Mrs. Grace never imagined that Tuesday morning would completely change the course of her life. At 68, she maintained her simple routine in the small town of Richmond, selling pastries and croquettes from an improvised stall in the central square, when the deafening noise of a helicopter shattered the tranquility of the place. The helicopter landed right there in the square, kicking up a cloud of dust that made all the vendors cover their goods. When the dust settled, two elegant figures stepped out of the aircraft. They were two young men of about 20, wearing impeccable suits, well-groomed hair, and a confident posture. Mrs. Grace felt her legs weaken as they walked directly toward her, for she immediately recognized those faces she had loved and cared for over the years. Connor and Brandon, the twins she had raised since they were 6 years old, were standing there before her, transformed into successful men. Tears began to stream down the woman's wrinkled face before they even said a word. The boys, now grown, ran to her and enveloped her in a tight hug that lasted several minutes. Connor was the first to speak, his voice choked with emotion. "Mom Grace, you have no idea how much we missed you," Brandon added, holding the calloused hands of the woman who had raised them. "We never forgot anything you did for us. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night when we were sick, every meal you skipped to feed us." The small crowd that had gathered around watched the scene with curiosity and emotion. Mrs. Grace could hardly believe what she was seeing. The two boys who had arrived at her door on a rainy night, skinny and scared, were now imposing and prosperous men. Brandon explained that they had built a technology company in New York and had come to take her away to offer her a better life. The woman's initial reaction was suspicion, as had always been her nature. Throughout her life, she had learned that things that seemed too good to be true usually hid some problem, but the loving insistence of the two, combined with the evident love in their eyes, began to break down her defenses. Connor took her hand and said he never wanted her to worry about money or the future again. The sudden arrival of the helicopter had attracted not only the curious, but also opportunistic people. Mr. Gerald, the merchant who owned a clothing store in the square and had always treated Mrs. Grace with disdain, now approached with a forced smile, trying to strike up a conversation and appear friendly. The woman immediately noticed the falseness, but decided not to comment, so as not to ruin the special moment of the reunion. During the conversation, Brandon mentioned that they had always kept the key to the old house where they had lived together, a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. It was there they wanted to take her first, to show her how they intended to renovate the property. But when they mentioned the house, Mrs. Grace's face visibly paled, and her hands began to tremble more than usual. It was then that she revealed, her voice broken with shame, that the house had been sold to pay debts 5 years earlier. She had hidden this fact out of pure embarrassment, not wanting the boys to know about the financial difficulties she faced after they left to study in New York. Connor was visibly shaken by the news, while Brandon tried to remain calm, though his hands clenched into fists revealed his indignation. The woman told how she had lost everything trying to keep the small business running when she became seriously ill 3 years ago. The expensive medications, medical appointments, and the inability to work for months had drained all of her savings. She had first sold the furniture, then the jewelry she had received from her mother, and finally the house, keeping only enough money to set up the pastel stand. The twins exchanged a look, with a determination that Mrs. Grace knew well from their childhood. Brandon declared they would buy the property back immediately, no matter the price. Connor finished by saying they would never let her go through hardships again. They took the address of the real estate agency responsible for the sale and left immediately, leaving the lady in the square with a mixture of hope and apprehension. At the agency, the boys discovered the house had been purchased by Derek Morrison, a real estate speculator known in the area for buying properties in desperate situations for low prices. When they tried to contact him to negotiate the purchase, the man initially proved intractable, stating he had no interest in selling regardless of the price offered. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out now. Continuing. The twins' persistence eventually managed to schedule a meeting with Derek Morrison the next day. The speculator, a middle-aged man with a sloppy appearance and a calculating gaze, received them in his makeshift office in a warehouse on the outskirts of town. During the conversation, he demonstrated knowledge of details about Mrs. Grace's life that made them uncomfortable. It was then that Derek made an insinuation that completely changed the course of the conversation. He suggested that the lady had not been completely honest about how the boys had come to her. With a malicious smile, he pulled a yellowed folder containing old documents from a drawer. Brandon tried to see the contents, but the speculator quickly closed the folder. Derek revealed he had information that might interest the twins about their true origin. He insinuated that there were people still looking for them, people who had never given up on finding them. Connor felt a chill in his stomach upon hearing these words, while Brandon tried to process what that could mean. The speculator then showed documents indicating that the twins' biological parents might still be alive. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. All these years, they had believed Mrs. Grace's version that they were orphans, children of parents who had died in an accident when they were 5 years old. When they confronted Mrs. Grace with this information, she panicked. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she tried to explain that at the time she had believed a different version. A social worker had told her the boys had been voluntarily abandoned by parents who couldn't raise them. She swore she never meant to deceive them. The revelation created the first serious disagreement between the twins. Connor wanted to investigate immediately to discover the whole truth about their past, while Brandon preferred to ignore this information, considering Mrs. Grace his only true mother. The division between the brothers deeply worried the lady, who had always seen them united in every situation. For several days, tension grew in the small house the twins had rented for Mrs. Grace. Connor spent hours on the phone trying to trace information about his biological parents, while Brandon dedicated himself exclusively to caring for the lady and planning improvements for her life. Meals became silent and uncomfortable. It was Brandon who finally suggested they seek professional help to investigate the past. They hired Jennifer Adams, a private investigator specialized in reuniting separated families. Jennifer was a 50-year-old woman, experienced and sensitive, who immediately understood the delicacy of the situation. Jennifer's investigation led to Linda Thompson, a woman who worked at a shelter in the neighboring town Lancaster. Linda had worked in the social welfare system at the time the twins were given to Mrs. Grace and vaguely remembered the case. She confirmed that she had met the biological parents a few years earlier, but they had moved away after losing their children. Linda revealed that the biological parents, Robert and Margaret Foster, had been victims of a scam perpetrated by a dishonest intermediary. They never consented to giving up the children and never received the money they were promised. On the contrary, they were deceived with the promise that the boys would be temporarily cared for by a wealthy family while they sorted out financial problems. The information brought a new perspective to the whole situation. Mrs. Grace was not the villain of the story, but had also been a victim of the same con artist. The intermediary had lied to everyone involved, creating a web of misinformation that resulted in the family's separation. The discovery relieved some of the guilt the woman carried, but brought new concerns about the reunion. Jennifer found out that Robert and Margaret Foster now lived in Philadelphia, where they had opened a small tailoring shop. They had never given up searching for their children and kept in touch with several organizations that helped reunite separated families. The information on where to find them was finally within reach, but no one knew what the first meeting would be like. The trip to Philadelphia was tense. Mrs. Grace insisted on accompanying the twins, despite their initial resistance, as they feared for her emotional well-being. During the journey, the car they had rented developed mechanical problems on an isolated road between the two cities, forcing them to look for a nearby repair shop. The shop was a small family-run establishment managed by Mr. Walter, a middle-aged mechanic with calloused hands and a friendly smile. When he saw the twins, his expression changed completely. He observed them for a few seconds before asking if they were brothers. When they confirmed they were twins, Mr. Walter became visibly emotional. The mechanic revealed that he knew two people who passed through there regularly looking for lost twins. Every year, on the same day, a couple would appear at the shop with old photos of two children, asking if anyone had seen boys who looked like them. Mr. Walter kept one of the photos the couple had left years before, and when he showed it, There was no doubt it was Connor and Brandon as children. The revelation moved everyone present. Mr. Walter said the couple always returned on the boy's birthday, which was only 3 days away. They had kept hope alive for over a decade, traveling through neighboring towns and spreading photos of their lost sons. The mechanic provided the address of the tailoring shop and offered to accompany them there. Arriving at the neighborhood indicated by Mr. Walter, they easily located the tailoring shop. It was a small, well-kept establishment with a discreet sign out front reading, "Foster Tailoring, Alterations and Repairs." Through the window, they could see a middle-aged woman working at a sewing machine, while a man organized fabrics on a shelf in the back. The sight of their biological parents left the twins frozen for a few minutes. Connor was the first to recover and suggested they go in, but Brandon hesitated, looking at Mrs. Grace with concern. The woman, even with her heart racing, encouraged the boys to move forward, saying they needed to know their complete story. When they entered the workshop, Margaret Foster looked up from the sewing machine and for a moment was motionless, watching the two young men who had come in. Robert Foster stopped what he was doing and slowly approached, his eyes fixed on the twins' faces. The silence lasted several seconds before Margaret whispered a name she hadn't uttered in years. "Connor and Brandon," she said with a choked voice. "Is it you?" Robert moved closer, his hands trembling as he tried to process what he was seeing. The boys they had searched for tirelessly for over a decade were standing there in front of them, grown and well-dressed, clearly successful in life. The first meeting between the two sets of parents was charged with intense and conflicting emotions. Margaret and Robert were shocked to learn that their sons were alive and apparently successful, but they also showed immediate gratitude that Mrs. Grace had cared for them with so much love. The first words were of thanks, not accusation. However, as the conversation deepened, a disturbing revelation emerged. Robert explained that they had never signed any papers of donation or abandonment. In fact, they had been deceived by a man who presented himself as a social worker and promised to care for the children temporarily while the family was going through financial difficulties. Margaret told how the con man, who identified himself as Charles Anderson, had appeared at a time when they were desperate. Robert had lost his job at the factory. She was pregnant with complications and they couldn't properly feed their 5-year-old twins. Charles promised a temporary solution with a wealthy family who would care for the children for a few months. The supposed social worker had taken the boys, promising they would return in 3 months, when the family's financial situation was resolved. He even showed forged documents indicating that the temporary family would pay a monthly stipend to Robert and Margaret. Naturally, the money never arrived, and Charles Anderson simply disappeared. The discovery that they had all been victims of the same con man completely changed the dynamics of the situation. Mrs. Grace had received the boys through a social worker who introduced herself as Charlotte Anderson. Clearly the same person or someone working in concert. She too had been deceived with a false story about irresponsible parents who abandoned the children. The revelation united the two families against the true culprit of the separation, but it also brought a new practical concern. A lawyer consulted later explained that, technically, Mrs. Grace's custody had never been properly legalized, creating a legally complex situation that could cause problems in the future. The twins felt emotionally torn between two families who genuinely loved them. On one hand, they had their biological parents who had never given up searching for them and who had been cruelly deceived. On the other hand, they had Mrs. Grace who had dedicated the best years of her life to raising them with love and sacrifice, even while facing immense difficulties. During the following days, the two families spent a lot of time talking and getting to know each other better. Margaret and Robert told about the years of searching, the sleepless nights, the resources spent on private investigators and newspaper ads. Mrs. Grace shared memories of the boys growing up, their mischief, achievements, and the moments of pride they experienced together. Connor proposed a solution that initially seemed radical. He wanted to unite the two families in a common project. His idea was to transform the small tailoring workshop of his biological parents into a larger cooperative, which could employ other people from the community and be funded by the business success he and Brandon had achieved. The initial proposal generated mixed reactions. Robert and Margaret were touched by the generosity, but worried about accepting financial help from their children so soon after the reunion. Mrs. Grace, in turn, felt threatened by the idea, fearing she was losing her special role in the lives of the boys she had raised. Brandon tried to mediate between the differing opinions, but realized his own position was causing more division than unity. He wanted to honor both families equally, but didn't know how to do it without hurting someone's feelings. The emotional pressure of trying to please everyone was beginning to affect his own emotional stability. The family tension reached a critical point during a heated discussion about the future. Mrs. Grace openly expressed her fear of being replaced by the real family, while Margaret tried to assure her that she would always be respected as the mother who raised the boys. In the middle of the argument, the elderly lady began to feel chest pains and had difficulty breathing. Mrs. Grace's distress frightened everyone and resulted in a rush to the hospital. In the emergency room, doctors diagnosed an episode of severe anxiety combined with high blood pressure, but fortunately, nothing more serious. The scare temporarily united everyone around the lady's well-being, but at the hospital, an unexpected complication arose. A hospital social worker, following standard protocols, began questioning the confusing legal situation when she realized there were two families claiming kinship with the same young adults. Although Connor and Brandon were of legal age, the employee threatened to involve Child Protective Services to investigate possible irregularities in the past custody documentation. The bureaucratic interference at an already emotionally delicate moment left everyone exhausted. Connor exploded at the social worker, questioning why she was complicating a situation the families were resolving amicably. Brandon tried to calm him down but was also visibly irritated by the unnecessary intrusion. In the hospital room, while Mrs. Grace rested under medical observation, she called the twins for a private conversation. In a weak but determined voice, she revealed her greatest fear, that the boys would abandon her now that they had found their true family. She confessed she had always known this day might come and had tried to prepare herself emotionally to let them go. The revelation completely broke the twins' resistance. Connor began to cry, something he hadn't done since childhood, while holding Mrs. Grace's hand. Brandon knelt beside the bed and assured her she would always be their mother, no matter how many other people appeared in their lives. They realized how much she had sacrificed for them and decided to make a definitive decision about the future. When Margaret and Robert returned to the hospital the next day, they found a transformed situation. The twins had spent the night talking and had reached a conclusion about how to proceed. They proposed a family meeting to openly discuss all pending issues and find a solution that honored everyone involved. During the meeting at the hospital, Robert and Margaret made a decision that surprised everyone. After hearing the detailed accounts of the boys' upbringing, they publicly recognized Mrs. Grace as the twins' true mother. They proposed to legally formalize the lady as the adoptive mother, renouncing any claim to custody and asking only to be part of the extended family. The generous proposal deeply moved Mrs. Grace, but the legal process faced bureaucratic obstacles. The authorities argued that the lady's advanced age made the formal adoption process complicated. Moreover, the irregular situation from the past created complex legal precedents that could take years to resolve. While navigating the legal bureaucracy, Derek Morrison, the real estate speculator who owned the twins' former home, returned with new blackmail. He had learned about the family reunion through town gossip and now threatened to sell information about the confusing legal situation to sensationalist journalists, unless he received an exorbitant sum of money. Derek's threat forced the twins to consider drastic measures to protect their family's privacy. Connor was inclined to pay the demanded amount to avoid public exposure, while Brandon insisted on confronting the speculator legally, even if it meant dealing with unwanted publicity. The disagreement between the brothers quickly intensified, creating a crack in a relationship that had always been solid as a rock. Connor argued they had enough resources to resolve the situation quickly through payment, while Brandon considered it a dangerous precedent that could attract more blackmailers in the future. Mrs. Grace tried to intervene in the twins' discussion, but realized her opinion no longer carried the same weight as before. The boys were now successful adult men, making complex business decisions she didn't fully understand. For the first time, she felt truly old and out of place. The decision to hire Jennifer Adams, the private investigator, proved wise when she uncovered crucial information about Derek Morrison. The speculator had an extensive history of similar blackmail against other families in vulnerable situations. Jennifer suggested setting a trap to catch the man in the act, but the plan involved considerable risks. Jennifer's plan required the twins to pretend to accept paying the blackmail, but on the condition that Derek provide all the information he possessed about the con artist Charles Charlotte Anderson. During the money exchange, investigators would be recording the conversation to obtain evidence of the extortion crime. Mrs. Grace vehemently opposed the risky plan, preferring to resolve everything peacefully, even if it meant paying the demanded money. She argued that at her age, it wasn't worth taking unnecessary risks. Her conservative stance created more tension in the family, which was already dealing with enough pressure. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot, as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. During the preparation of the trap against Derek, Jennifer made an unexpected discovery in the documents she managed to access. The speculator not only had information about the scam applied to the families, but also proof that Charles Anderson was still active, running similar scams in other regions of the country. This information completely changed the focus of the investigation. It was no longer just about recovering the house or stopping Derek's blackmail, but an opportunity to bring justice for crimes that had affected dozens of families over the years. Jennifer presented evidence that Charles Anderson had been operating for over 15 years, always moving to a new region when things got tough. The twins felt morally obligated to proceed with the investigation, even knowing it would prolong their exposure to dangerous situations. Margaret and Robert supported the decision, arguing that other families deserved to have their situations clarified. Mrs. Grace, though worried, understood that her boys had grown up and become men of principle. The trap for Derek was executed in an isolated parking lot on the outskirts of Richmond. The twins arrived at the location with a briefcase containing the requested money, while Jennifer and her team monitored everything from vehicles parked strategically around the area. The tension was palpable as they awaited the arrival of the speculator. Derek arrived punctually at the appointed meeting, driving a luxury car that contrasted with his disheveled appearance. During the recorded conversation, he not only confirmed his blackmail threats, but also revealed details about his partnership with Charles Anderson in the scams applied against vulnerable families. The recordings obtained during the meeting provided sufficient evidence for a formal complaint. Derek was subsequently arrested for extortion, and the information he possessed about Charles Anderson was handed over to the competent authorities. The speculator, trying to negotiate a reduced sentence, provided even more details about the criminal network. The complaint against Charles Anderson led the authorities to discover an operation much larger than they had initially imagined. The con artist had created a network of fake charities and social services, applying scams on desperate families in several regions of the country. Dozens of similar cases were identified and investigated. The case gained national repercussion when legitimate journalists began investigating the scam network. The stories of families separated for decades began to appear in the media, and the twins found themselves at the center of a campaign for justice. They became symbols of resistance against the exploitation of vulnerable families. With Derek Morrison exposed and arrested, the situation of the twins' old house was finally resolved. A judge determined that the property had been acquired through information obtained illegally and ordered its return at no cost to the family. The legal victory symbolized the first step toward the complete resolution of all conflicts. During the ceremony for the recovered house, which took place in the presence of press representatives and local authorities, Robert and Margaret gave an emotional speech. They publicly acknowledged Mrs. Grace as the true mother of the twins, thanking her for taking care of the children when they could not do so. The couple's generous gesture broke the last emotional barriers that still existed between all parties involved. Mrs. Grace cried openly when Margaret hugged her and called her comadre, a term of respect and affection that formally recognized her maternal role. From that moment on, everyone was united as an expanded family. The twins announced their decision to transform the recovered house into something greater than a residence. They proposed creating a family mediation center where people in similar situations could receive free legal and emotional support. The project would be financed by the resources from the technology company they had built in New York. Mrs. Grace would be named coordinator of the center, a position that would honor her life experience and her wisdom in family matters. The work would give her a new purpose and allow her to help other families avoid the separation she had witnessed. The prospect of using her experience to help others visibly rejuvenated her. The center would function as a bridge between families separated by adverse circumstances, offering not only emotional support, but also legal assistance to resolve bureaucratic issues. Volunteer lawyers would work together with psychologists and social workers to provide comprehensive support. Margaret and Robert offered to work in the tailoring workshop that would be installed at the center, where they could teach a trade to people in vulnerable situations. The idea of transforming their manual skill into a tool for social help filled them with purpose and hope. During the months of preparation for the center's opening, the extended family worked together on a common project. Connor coordinated the financial and legal aspects. Brandon handled infrastructure and technology. Mrs. Grace planned the support programs, and Margaret and Robert organized the vocational training activities. The collaborative work strengthened the bonds among everyone involved and created a healthy family dynamic. Differences of opinion that occasionally arose were resolved through open and respectful conversations. Everyone had learned to value the unique contributions of each family member. Jennifer Adams continued working as an investigator for the center, specializing in cases of families separated by scams or irregular circumstances. Her experience and network of contacts proved invaluable in helping others reunite with lost relatives. Mr. Walter, the mechanic who had kept the photo of the twins for years, became one of the center's first volunteers. His workshop began serving as a support point for the Missing Persons Information Network, demonstrating how small acts of kindness can have lasting impacts. As the project developed, unexpected challenges arose. The demand for help was much greater than they had anticipated, and human and financial resources needed to be rapidly expanded. The twins invested a significant portion of their business profits into the center, but also sought partnerships with other organizations. The experience of managing the center taught valuable lessons about social management and community impact. Connor discovered a passion for social projects he never knew he had, while Brandon found satisfaction in using his technological expertise to develop systems that made the volunteers' work easier. Mrs. Grace flourished in her new role as coordinator. Her life wisdom and natural counseling ability made her a respected figure in the community. People came from neighboring towns specifically to talk with her about family problems. The center's success began attracting attention from other regions, and proposals for franchises or expansions arrived regularly. However, the family decided to maintain focus on the quality of local service, preferring to be a successful model that others could replicate in their own communities. 6 months after the opening, the center had helped more than 50 families reunite or resolve pending legal matters. Each success story was celebrated as a collective victory, further strengthening the unity of the extended family. Charles Anderson was finally located and arrested in a coordinated operation that resulted in the arrest of several accomplices. His trial became a landmark in family protection legislation, establishing important legal precedents for punishing crimes against the family structure. During the trial, several families who had been victims of Charles's scams testified about the lasting impact of his crimes. The twins and their families were called to give testimony, an emotionally intense but cathartic experience that brought a sense of closure to all the past trauma. Charles Anderson's sentencing to 15 years in prison was met with satisfaction by all the families involved. More important than the punishment, however, was the establishment of new laws that would make it harder for similar scammers to operate in the future. The Family Center developed specific programs for children who had been separated from their families, offering specialized psychological support to help with adaptation and processing trauma. Mrs. Grace proved particularly effective in this work, using her own experience to connect with the children. As the first anniversary of the family reunion approached, everyone reflected on the profound changes that had occurred in their lives. What began as an unexpected encounter in the square of Richmond had evolved into a social movement benefiting hundreds of people. Connor and Brandon decided to expand their business operations to include a division dedicated to social responsibility. They created a foundation that would fund similar centers in other regions, always maintaining the philosophy of human and personalized service they learned from Mrs. Grace. Margaret and Robert became certified instructors and began training other professionals to work in similar centers. Their personal experience with family separation and reunion made them especially qualified to understand and help other families in similar situations. The sewing workshop at the center expanded to include other vocational activities, such as cooking, carpentry, and basic computer skills. The goal was to provide families not only with emotional reunion, but also practical tools to rebuild their lives sustainably. The project's success attracted international attention, and delegations from other countries visited the center to learn about its methodologies. Mrs. Grace, who had never left her hometown region, suddenly found herself receiving visitors from distant places, an experience that filled her with pride and purpose. The media began regularly documenting the center's activities, but always with care to protect the privacy of the families served. The twins insisted on keeping the focus on success stories rather than exploiting the personal drama of vulnerable people. During the second year of operation, the center established partnerships with local universities to develop research on family reunification and separation trauma. The data collected helped improve service practices and inform public policies related to family protection. Mrs. Grace began writing her memoirs, not for publication, but as a historical record of the lessons learned over decades of helping families. Her notes became valuable study material for new volunteers and professionals working at the center. The relationship between the two families continued to evolve and deepen. Holidays and celebrations were shared among everyone, creating new traditions that honored both biological roots and the bonds created through care and love. The children no longer referred to biological parents and adoptive mother, but simply to their large, close-knit family. Connor met a volunteer lawyer at the center and developed a serious relationship, bringing another person into the expanded family. Brandon focused his energy on social work, finding personal fulfillment in helping others while remaining single by choice. Mrs. Grace's health remained stable, and her doctors attributed her vitality to the renewed sense of purpose she found in the center's work. At 70 years old, she was more active and engaged than she had been in decades, overseeing multiple programs and mentoring young volunteers. The center developed a special program for elderly people who had lost contact with family, recognizing that family separation did not only affect children. Mrs. Grace led this initiative, using her network of contacts in the community to locate lost relatives of older individuals. 3 years after the reunion, the family had found a perfect balance between supporting each other and maintaining individual independence. The twins continued expanding their businesses, but always set aside significant time for social work and family. Margaret developed an occupational therapy program through sewing, helping people with depression and anxiety find purpose and community through manual work. Robert created a cooperative for small household repairs that employed people in socially vulnerable situations. The center's model had been replicated in 12 different cities, always adapted to local needs, but maintaining the fundamental principles of personalized care and comprehensive support. Mrs. Grace traveled regularly for consultations, an activity that kept her young in spirit. The family's story was documented in a book written by a journalist specializing in social issues, with all profits being donated to expand the center's programs. The book became recommended reading in social work and psychology courses at several universities. During the 4th anniversary of the reunion, the family organized a large celebration in the square where it had all begun. Hundreds of people attended, including many families that had been reunited through the center's work. The event became an annual city tradition. Derek Morrison, serving his reduced sentence for cooperating with authorities, wrote a letter of apology to the family, expressing genuine remorse for his actions. Although they chose not to respond, the letter represented a symbolic closure to that difficult chapter. The scholarship program established by the twins allowed dozens of young people from families served by the center to access higher education. Several of these young people returned as volunteers, creating a positive cycle of mutual aid and community growth. Mrs. Grace began to be publicly recognized for her social work, receiving honors from the city and state government. Although grateful for the recognition, she always insisted on sharing any credit with the entire family and team of volunteers. The small pastel stand where it all began was transformed into a community snack bar operating within the center, serving free meals to families in vulnerable situations. The menu included Mrs. Grace's traditional recipes, keeping alive the connection to her humble origins. Connor and his girlfriend announced their engagement during the 4th anniversary celebration, choosing to hold the ceremony at the center surrounded by the extended family and community they had helped create. The wedding represented not only a personal union, but also the continuity of the family legacy. Brandon decided to pursue a second degree in social psychology, seeking to theoretically ground the practical work he had developed at the center. His personal experience combined with academic knowledge promised to contribute even more to the care programs. The sewing cooperative grew so much that it needed its own headquarters, employing more than 20 people and providing clothing for other social organizations in the region. Margaret became a respected social entrepreneur, often consulted about models of solidarity economics. Robert developed a free home maintenance program for elderly community members, mobilizing young volunteers to help older people with small repairs and improvements to their homes. The program strengthened intergenerational bonds in the community. The center established partnerships with local hospitals to provide emotional support for families facing medical crises. Mrs. Grace trained volunteers specialized in hospital accompaniment, using her personal experience with health problems to help others. The foundation created by the twins expanded its activities to include microcredit for families who wanted to start small businesses. The program had a high success rate, with most loans being repaid on time and the businesses thriving. During the 5th anniversary, the celebration included the unveiling of a memorial dedicated to all the families who had been separated by adverse circumstances. The memorial was not just a monument to suffering, but an affirmation of the human capacity to overcome adversity and reunite. Mrs. Grace, now 73 years old, remained the heart of the center, but had trained capable successors to continue the work should her health decline. She found great satisfaction in seeing young people taking on responsibilities and developing their own approaches to social work. The family's story had inspired several academic theses and scientific articles on family resilience and the rebuilding of bonds. Researchers from renowned universities regularly visited the center to study its methods and results. Charles Anderson, serving his sentence in prison, had become a case study for rehabilitation programs. Psychologists worked with him to understand the motivations behind his crimes, information that helped prevent similar situations. The center's success attracted funding from international organizations interested in replicating the model in other countries. Delegations from various nations visited Richmond to study the methodologies developed by the extended family. Connor and his wife had their first child, a boy named Walter, in honor of the mechanic who had kept the photo of the twins. The birth brought new joy to the whole family and symbolized the continuity of traditions of love and care. Brandon remained single by choice, dedicating himself fully to social work and studies. He was developing a doctoral thesis on family separation trauma that promised to contribute significantly to the academic field. Margaret launched an ethical clothing line produced by the cooperative, with part of the profits funding the center. The brand gained national recognition for its socially responsible practices and product quality. Robert established a vocational training program in partnership with technical schools in the region, offering free carpentry and mechanics courses to youth from families served by the center. The courses had a high employment rate among graduates. The service model developed at the center was adopted by the state government as public policy, resulting in the establishment of similar centers in all major cities in the region. Mrs. Grace was invited to oversee the statewide implementation. During the 6th anniversary, the celebration included the presence of the state governor, who announced the creation of a state program based on the center's model. The official recognition validated years of dedicated work and opened doors for even greater expansion. Mrs. Grace's health remained surprisingly robust for her age, something she attributed to the purpose she had found in life. Her doctors agreed that social and family engagement had contributed significantly to her longevity and vitality. The center had become a landmark in the city, with tourists and visitors including it in their itineraries. The family decided to create educational tours that explained the work done and the history behind the project, generating additional income for the programs. Connor assumed the full-time presidency of the foundation, leaving the daily management of his technology company to focus on social work. His business experience brought efficiency and financial sustainability to the social projects. Brandon completed his doctorate and was invited to teach at a prestigious university, but chose to remain in Richmond to continue the practical work at the center. He developed an internship program for university students interested in social work. The tailoring cooperative expanded to include production of school uniforms, provided free of charge to underprivileged families in the region. The program ensured that financial issues would not prevent children from attending school with dignity. Robert created a trade school within the center, offering courses in various technical areas. The school partnered with local businesses that guaranteed employment for graduates, creating a clear path from vulnerability to self-sufficiency. The family's work had inspired changes in national legislation on family protection. Stricter laws were passed to prevent scams like those applied by Charles Anderson, and new protocols were established for family reunification. During the 7th anniversary, the celebration included the launch of a documentary about the family's story and the center's impact on the community. The film was later used as educational material in schools and universities. Mrs. Grace began working on creating a historical archive about separated families in the region, collecting stories and documents that would aid future research and reunifications. The project became a community memory preservation initiative. The center established a support program for refugee and immigrant families, recognizing that family separation was not just a local problem. Mrs. Grace led the creation of culturally sensitive protocols to serve families from different backgrounds. Connor and his wife had a second child, a girl who was named Margaret in honor of the twins' biological mother. The birth further strengthened the bonds among all parts of the extended family. Brandon met a volunteer psychologist at the center and developed a serious relationship, bringing new dynamics to his personal life. The couple planned to collaborate on research about family trauma and healing methods. Margaret's cooperative had become a model of solidarity economy, studied at national and international universities. She regularly received invitations to speak about social entrepreneurship and community development. Robert developed a mentorship program where experienced professionals voluntarily trained young people in their areas of expertise. The program created a professional support network that benefited hundreds of people annually. The center expanded its activities to include free legal support for family matters, with volunteer lawyers offering consultations and representation to underprivileged families. The program significantly reduced legal costs for family reunification. During the 8th anniversary, the celebration marked the assistance of over 1,000 families by the center and its branches. Each success story was celebrated, but everyone recognized there was still much work to be done. Mrs. Grace, now 76 years old, continued to be an inspiring presence at the center, although she had delegated many administrative responsibilities to focus on direct family assistance. Her wisdom and experience remained valuable resources. The model developed by the family had been adapted and implemented in 6 different countries, always respecting local cultures but maintaining the fundamental principles of humanized care. The international expansion validated the universality of family values. Connor established a pension fund for all regular employees and volunteers of the center, ensuring financial security for those who dedicated their lives to social work. The fund was sustained by the profits from the technology company. Brandon completed his postdoctoral research and published an academic book on family reunification that became a reference in the field. Despite prestigious academic offers, he chose to remain connected to the practical work. Margaret launched a line of handmade products that employed people from various cooperatives supported by the Centre. The brand gained national recognition for its quality and social commitment, generating sustainable income for hundreds of families. Robert created a program for building and renovating affordable housing, mobilizing skilled volunteers to improve the living conditions of families in need. The program became a model for similar initiatives in other regions. The Centre established a community library specializing in resources on family, psychology, and social development. The library served not only the local community, but also researchers and students from various institutions. During the 9th anniversary, the celebration included the announcement that the Centre had been selected as a model for a United Nations program on family reunification. The international recognition brought prestige and additional resources for expansion. Mrs. Grace received a national honor for her services to society, becoming the oldest person to receive the distinction. During the ceremony, she dedicated the award to all the families that had been separated and later reunited. The family's pioneering work had inspired the creation of a new profession, family reunification specialist. Universities began offering specific courses in the field, and the Centre became a mandatory internship site for students. Connor was elected to the City Council, using his position to influence public policies favorable to families. His personal and business experience brought a unique perspective to the municipal administration. Brandon married the psychologist, and together they established a research centre attached to the main centre, focused on developing new family care methodologies. The research was funded by international grants and university partnerships. Margaret's cooperative had grown so much that it needed a second unit, employing more than 50 people and fulfilling orders from across the country. The economic success demonstrated that social projects could be sustainable and profitable. Robert became a technical teacher at a state school, teaching practical workshops for young people interested in manual trades. His pedagogical approach emphasized not only technical skills, but also work and community values. The Centre developed a prevention program, working with families at risk of separation before crises occurred. The proactive program significantly reduced the number of family separations in the region. During the 10th anniversary, the celebration was broadcast nationally on television, reaching millions of people and inspiring similar initiatives across the country. The family's story had become a national symbol of resilience and family love. Mrs. Grace, though physically more fragile at 78, remained mentally sharp and emotionally engaged. She had become an almost legendary figure in the community, respected for her wisdom and tireless dedication to families in need. The legacy of the extended family had transcended their original expectations, creating systematic changes in how society approached family issues. The Centre was no longer just a local project, but a national movement with international implications. Connor and his family moved to a house near the Centre, wanting their children to grow up immersed in the values of community service. The children, now of school age, were already showing a natural interest in helping other families. Brandon and his wife announced they were expecting their first child, news that filled the entire extended family with joy. The prospect of a new generation being born into the strengthened family symbolized hope and continuity. Margaret was invited to join the National Council for Solidarity Economy, a position she would use to influence public policies favorable to cooperatives and social enterprises. Her personal journey made her an authentic spokesperson for working families. Robert established a technical exchange program with other countries, allowing young Americans to learn trades abroad, while foreigners came to the United States to learn about the community development model created by the family. The Centre had become a complex with multiple buildings, including service rooms, workshops, a library, a daycare, a community kitchen, and even a small lodging for families in transit. The infrastructure reflected the organic growth of the programs. The family's story was adapted into a film that premiered at international festivals, winning awards for its authenticity and emotional impact. All profits from the film were donated to the international expansion of family reunification programs. During the 11th anniversary celebration, plans were announced to establish a university institute dedicated exclusively to family studies and community development. The institute would be built in Richmond, maintaining the movement's roots. Mrs. Grace began compiling her memories into an autobiographical book, not out of vanity, but as a historical record of the social transformations she had witnessed. Her reflections offered valuable perspectives on family changes over the decades. The service model developed by the family had been officially adopted as national policy, resulting in the creation of similar centers in all state capitals. Standardization ensured consistent quality while allowing for regional adaptations. Connor launched a digital platform that connected separated families across the country, using advanced technology to facilitate searches and reunifications. The platform processed thousands of inquiries monthly and had an impressive success rate. Brandon defended his postdoctoral thesis and was offered a professorship at Harvard, but chose to remain in Richmond to continue developing the pioneering work. His decision inspired other academics to prioritize social impact over institutional prestige. Margaret expanded the cooperative to include organic food production, creating a complete production chain that benefited family farmers in the region. Diversification ensured greater economic stability for the families involved. Robert was invited to lead a national professional qualification program, but preferred to continue the local work, training other educators to replicate his methods. His decentralized approach multiplied the impact of his experience. The center established partnerships with orphanages and shelters to facilitate responsible adoptions and prevent unnecessary separations. The program educated families interested in adoption and provided ongoing support after placement. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we are just starting out, now continuing. During the 12th anniversary, the celebration included the inauguration of an international memorial dedicated to all families that had been separated by conflicts, persecution, or adverse circumstances. The memorial received visitors from around the world. Mrs. Grace, now recognized as a pioneer in family reunification work, continued to personally assist families arriving at the center. Her reassuring presence and accumulated wisdom were irreplaceable resources for the work. The foundation established by the twins had become one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country, funding hundreds of projects related to family and community development. Professional management ensured transparency and efficiency in the application of resources. Connor was offered a position in the federal government related to family policies, but declined to focus on local work and raising his children. His decision reflected the family values that had been central throughout his journey. Brandon and his wife had twins, a coincidence the entire family interpreted as a poetic symbol of continuity. The babies were named Robert and Margaret, honoring their biological grandparents and perpetuating the tradition of mutual recognition. Margaret received international recognition for her work in solidarity economics, being invited to speak at universities and global conferences. She used every opportunity to promote the American model of community development based on family values. Robert established an educational foundation specifically for traditional trades, preserving knowledge that was disappearing due to modernization. The foundation maintained archives of artisanal techniques and offered courses for those interested in learning manual skills. The center developed a support program for elderly caregivers, recognizing that an aging population created new family challenges. The program offered respite for caregivers and social activities for the elderly, strengthening intergenerational bonds. During the 13th anniversary, it was announced that the model created by the family had been implemented in over 30 countries, adapted to different cultures, but maintaining the fundamental principles. The global expansion validated the universality of basic human values. Mrs. Grace turned 80 surrounded by a family that included not only the twins and their biological families, but hundreds of people she had helped over the years. The celebration became a community festival that lasted a week. The University Institute for Family Studies was officially inaugurated, offering undergraduate and graduate courses specialized in family reunification, community development, and solidarity economics. The institute attracted students from around the world. Connor assumed the deanship of the institute, combining his business experience with a passion for social work. Under his leadership, the institute established partnerships with prestigious universities and international organizations. Brandon became a full professor at the institute, developing an innovative curriculum that combined academic theory with community practice. His courses were considered the most sought after and had long waiting lists. Margaret published a book on solidarity economics based on her practical experience, which became required reading in social administration and sustainable development courses. The book was translated into several languages. Robert established a museum of traditional trades attached to the center, preserving tools, techniques, and stories of artisans from the region. The museum became a tourist and educational attraction, connecting past and present through manual work. The center expanded its services to include family conflict mediation, offering alternatives to the traditional judicial system. The mediation program had a high success rate and significantly reduced the time needed to resolve disputes. During the 14th anniversary, the celebration marked that over 10,000 families had been served by the center and its national and international branches. Each success story represented transformed lives and restored family bonds. Mrs. Grace, despite her advanced age, continued to be an inspiring presence at the center. Her routine had adapted to physical limitations, but her emotional and mental engagement remained intense. She became a living symbol of resilience and dedication. The digital platform created by Connor had evolved to include artificial intelligence that helped identify potential connections between separated families. The technology significantly increased search efficiency and reduced the average time for reunification. Brandon completed a second postdoctoral fellowship focused on the long-term psychological impact of family separation and reunification. His research contributed to more effective and sensitive care protocols tailored to the specific needs of each age group. Margaret expanded the cooperative to include community tourism, offering visitors authentic rural living experiences and education about solidarity economics. The program generated additional income for rural families, while educating tourists about sustainable development. Robert created a reverse mentorship program where elders taught traditional crafts to university students interested in combining academic knowledge with practical skills. The program strengthened intergenerational bonds and preserved ancestral knowledge. The center established a family policy observatory that monitored national and international legislation, providing data and recommendations for policymakers. The observatory became a reference for researchers and legislators. During the 15th anniversary, an international campus of the University Institute was inaugurated, welcoming students from over 50 countries. The campus symbolized the globalization of the family and community values developed in Richmond. Mrs. Grace was honored with a statue in the square where it all began, next to her old pastel stand. The statue did not depict her alone, but embracing the twin boys as children, symbolizing the maternal love that transformed lives. The family's legacy had transcended their personal circumstances, creating a global movement for valuing family and community. Universities offered courses on the Richmond model of social development, and researchers studied its methods and results. Connor and his family settled permanently in Richmond, with their children growing up immersed in the values of community service. The children, now teenagers, demonstrated natural leadership and passion for social causes. Brandon and his family also remained in the city, with their twins beginning to show early interest in family and social issues. The third generation was naturally absorbing the values that had guided the family's transformation. Margaret became an international consultant in solidarity economics, traveling the world to implement cooperatives based on the American model. Her expertise was sought by international organizations and governments interested in sustainable development. Robert established an international network of trade schools, connecting traditional artisans from different cultures for the exchange of knowledge and techniques. The network preserved cultural diversity while promoting global collaboration. The center had evolved into an educational, social, and cultural complex that attracted visitors from around the world. The infrastructure included auditoriums, research laboratories, residences for students and researchers, and community spaces for events. During what would be the last anniversary with Mrs. Grace's presence, the celebration lasted an entire week, with international delegations, government authorities, and thousands of families who had been helped by the center's work. Mrs. Grace, at 85 years old, gave an emotional speech during the main ceremony. She reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with 2 abandoned boys and evolved into a global movement for strengthening family and community. In her final public words, she thanked everyone who had contributed to the work, but emphasized that the true credit belonged to the families who had the courage to come together and start anew. She concluded by saying her greatest joy was knowing the work would continue through future generations. A few months after the celebration, Mrs. Grace passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the expanded family that had become her greatest work. Her passing was mourned not only locally, but internationally by organizations and families who had been touched by her work. Mrs. Grace's funeral became a celebration of life that drew thousands of people. Families she had helped traveled long distances to pay their respects. Government and international leaders sent condolences, recognizing her unique contribution to humanity. Connor and Brandon decided the best way to honor Mrs. Grace's memory was to expand the work she had started even further. They established a memorial fund that would finance family reunification projects in developing countries. Margaret and Robert assumed more prominent leadership roles at the center, ensuring the transition occurred smoothly. Their personal experience with separation and reunification especially qualified them to continue the work with the same sensitivity and dedication. The University Institute created a permanent chair in Mrs. Grace's name, dedicated to the study of community development based on family values. The first person to hold the position was a former beneficiary of the center who had become a doctor of social work. 1 year after Mrs. Grace's passing, the family organized an international conference on family reunification in her memory. The conference attracted experts from around the world and resulted in the creation of international protocols for serving separated families. The work begun in the small square of Richmond had become a lasting legacy, benefiting millions of people around the world. The story of maternal love that began with 2 abandoned boys had evolved into a global movement strengthening fundamental human bonds. On the 20th anniversary of the reunion, which was celebrated even without Mrs. Grace's physical presence, the family reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled. What began as an unexpected gathering had transformed into a global network of family support. Connor, now an established dean of the University Institute, had become an international reference in social organization management. His approach combining business efficiency with human values was studied in business schools around the world. Brandon, a respected tenured professor, had published several books that became required reading for professionals working with families. His research continued expanding the knowledge of separation trauma and family healing processes. Margaret had established an international network of cooperatives employing over 10,000 people in 20 countries. Her model of solidarity economy was being implemented by international organizations as a tool for sustainable development. Robert had become globally recognized as an expert in preserving traditional crafts. His teaching techniques were used in community development programs in countries where manual skills were important for economic livelihood. The children of the second generation, now young adults, had chosen careers that continued the family legacy. Some followed academic paths, others chose direct work with communities, but all maintained a commitment to family and social values. The original center in Richmond had become a pilgrimage site for people interested in social work and community development. Educational tours were offered regularly, and a visitor center told the complete story of the family's transformation. The digital platform created by Connor had evolved to include artificial intelligence resources that could predict family separation patterns and suggest preventive interventions. The technology was being tested in several countries with promising results. During the 21st anniversary, it was announced that the model developed by the family would be implemented as official policy of the European Union to handle refugee families. The international recognition validated decades of dedicated work. Mrs. Grace's autobiography, published posthumously based on her notes and recorded interviews, became an international bestseller. The book inspired thousands of people to get involved in community work and was translated into more than 30 languages. The University Institute had become one of the leading global institutions for research on family and community, attracting the best students and researchers from around the world. Its graduates worked in international organizations and governments, multiplying the impact of the values they had learned. The network of centers established based on the original model had served more than 100,000 families globally. Each center adapted the methods to local needs, but maintained the fundamental principles of personalized care and relationship building. During the 22nd anniversary, the city of Richmond was officially designated as a City of Family by UNESCO, recognizing its unique contribution to strengthening family and community bonds. The designation attracted even more international attention. The third generation of the family was beginning to assume leadership positions in the various projects. Although each young person had unique talents and interests, they all shared the commitment to social work that had defined their families. Connor announced his retirement from the dean's position to focus on writing a book about responsible social leadership. His successor was chosen democratically by the university community, reflecting the participatory values that had always characterized the family's work. Brandon received prestigious offers from international universities, but chose to remain in Richmond to continue developing applied research in partnership with local communities. His decision inspired other academics to prioritize social impact over institutional recognition. Margaret expanded her projects to include sustainable agriculture, working with family farmers to develop techniques that combined economic productivity with environmental responsibility. Her methods were being studied as models for climate change adaptation. Robert created a community college focused on traditional trades, offering quality education to people who did not have access to formal schooling. The community college became a model for inclusive education in marginalized communities. The 23rd anniversary marked the inauguration of a permanent international memorial dedicated to families separated by conflict and persecution. The memorial received thousands of visitors annually and became a global symbol of hope and reunification. The family's story had inspired an entire generation of social workers, researchers, and community activists. Universities around the world offered specific courses on the Richmond model, and its methodologies were considered international best practices. 24 years after the initial reunion, the family reflected on the lasting legacy they had created. What began as a personal story of separation and reunification had evolved into a global movement benefiting millions of people. During the 24th anniversary, it was announced that the family's work had inspired the creation of a new International Declaration of Family Rights, adopted by over 100 countries. The declaration established fundamental principles for the protection and reunification of families. The technological platform developed by Connor had become the standard tool used by international humanitarian organizations to reunite families separated by natural disasters, conflicts, and other crises. The technology had facilitated thousands of reunifications globally. Brandon completed his most ambitious longitudinal research, tracking reunited families over 2 decades to study the long-term effects of separation and reunification. The results contributed to more effective care protocols worldwide. Margaret was appointed a special consultant to the United Nations for community-based sustainable development. Her position allowed her to influence global policies and promote the Brazilian model of community development on an international scale. Robert received recognition from UNESCO for his contribution to the preservation of intangible cultural heritage through the teaching of traditional crafts. His work had preserved hundreds of artisanal techniques that were at risk of disappearing. The 25th anniversary was celebrated with a week of international events that attracted delegations from over 80 countries. The celebration included academic conferences, cultural exhibitions, artistic performances, and recognition ceremonies for families that had been reunited. During the closing ceremony of the 25th anniversary, Connor gave an emotional speech, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun in a simple square in Richmond. He thanked Mrs. Grace, whose memory continued to inspire the work, and renewed the entire family's commitment to the values she had taught. The helicopter that had brought the twins back 25 years earlier was donated to the center as a historical symbol of family transformation. Now on permanent display, the helicopter reminded visitors that extraordinary changes could begin with simple gestures of love and determination. The story that had begun with a poor elderly woman caring for two abandoned boys had evolved into a global legacy that would continue to benefit families for generations. The maternal love of Mrs. Grace had planted seeds that grew beyond her most optimistic expectations, creating a tree of hope that covered the entire world. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you are watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Mrs. Grace made the right decisions throughout this entire journey? We would love to read your opinion. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories.